The day my brother changed the locks, I was still listed as co-owner. That was the first betrayal. I remember standing outside the glass doors of our family auto shop at 6:15 a.m., coffee in hand, ready to open like I had every morning for 12 years. The new security panel blinked red. My key code failed. My physical key scraped uselessly against a lock I did not recognize. Through the window, I saw him. Ethan. Calm. Focused. Already inside. He did not look surprised to see me standing there. He walked to the door slowly, not to let me in, but to speak through the glass. His mouth moved with deliberate precision. He told me things had changed. That the board had voted. That restructuring was necessary. That I was no longer needed in daily operations. Board. Restructuring. Not needed. This was the same business our father built from a single rented garage in Ohio. The same business I helped scale into 3 locations across the state. I handled supplier negotiations. I built our fleet contracts. I spent nights rewriting operational systems while Ethan handled front-end marketing and client relationships. We were partners. At least I thought we were. I asked when this vote happened. He said it was procedural. Legal. Already filed. He said I would receive documentation from their attorney by the end of the day. Their attorney. Not ours. That was the second betrayal. He did not raise his voice. He did not look guilty. He spoke like a CEO delivering performance feedback to an underperforming employee. The tone was worse than anger. It was final. Behind him, I saw 2 new managers I did not recognize. My access badge no longer registered on the internal system. My email had already been disabled. Every trace of operational control had been erased overnight. 12 years reduced to a security denial. I stood there longer than I should have. Employees began arriving. Some avoided eye contact. Others looked confused. No one intervened. By noon, the legal notice arrived. Minority share dilution. Emergency capital injection. Voting rights temporarily suspended due to strategic restructuring. Strategic. He had planned this for months. That night, I drove past the shop again. Lights were on. Cars lined up. Business as usual. But something was off. Ethan thought removing me from the building meant removing me from the future. He believed control was permanent. What he did not realize was simple. I had built more than the shop. I had built the systems behind it. And systems, when understood deeply enough, can be rebuilt anywhere. He locked me out of the business. He had no idea he had just unlocked something far more dangerous. The legal documents arrived the next morning, thick with language designed to intimidate. Temporary dilution due to emergency expansion capital. External investors. Protective clauses. Performance-based reinstatement options. It looked airtight. Ethan had secured a private investor who injected enough cash to trigger a voting shift. My percentage dropped below controlling interest overnight. The restructuring clause buried in our original partnership agreement allowed emergency decisions under capital strain. The capital strain he had quietly manufactured. 3 months earlier, he had pushed for aggressive expansion into commercial fleet servicing. I had advised caution. Cash flow was stable but not excessive. Growth should be measured. He insisted. Now I understood why. He had overextended deliberately, then presented the shortfall as urgent. The investor stepped in. Shares rebalanced. Voting power shifted. Clean. Strategic. Calculated. But he underestimated one thing. I knew every vendor contract by memory. I knew which fleet clients were loyal to service quality rather than branding. I knew the operational weaknesses Ethan had never bothered to understand. Marketing builds visibility. Operations build survival. For 12 years, I had optimized repair time averages, parts procurement margins, technician retention systems. The backbone of the company was invisible, and I was the one who engineered it. By week 2, I stopped reacting emotionally and started auditing mentally. Who trusted me directly? Who valued efficiency over flash? Who might follow? Calls began quietly. Not persuasive. Not desperate. Just conversations. Former clients asked why response times had increased. Vendors mentioned payment cycles shifting. Technicians I mentored reached out about new management policies that prioritized cost-cutting over quality. Ethan was moving fast. Too fast. Rapid growth demands stable infrastructure. Without it, cracks spread. I did not threaten legal action. I did not beg for reinstatement. Instead, I registered a new LLC. Small. Lean. Focused on premium fleet maintenance. No retail noise. No flashy rebrand. Just performance. Within 30 days, 2 fleet contracts transitioned. They cited service reliability as their reason. Within 60 days, 3 of our most skilled technicians requested interviews. Ethan noticed. His email shifted tone from corporate detachment to strategic curiosity. He asked about collaboration opportunities, proposed temporary partnerships, suggested we align rather than compete. Now he used the word we again. I declined politely. The 3rd month hit harder for him. Expansion costs ballooned. Investor expectations tightened. Reviews online began referencing inconsistent turnaround times. Systems matter. And he no longer had the architect. One evening, a former manager forwarded me an internal memo. Budget tightening. Staff restructuring. Performance evaluations pending. Ethan was under pressure. He thought he had secured control. He had actually inherited risk. And pressure reveals who truly understands the business. This was no longer about getting back in. It was about building something he could not outmaneuver. Because the next move would not be defensive. It would be decisive. By month 4, the shift became visible. Not publicly. Not yet. But inside the industry, word travels faster than advertising. One of Ethan's largest fleet accounts delayed renewal. Officially, they cited internal review. Unofficially, I knew the reason. Missed deadlines. Inconsistent parts sourcing. Technicians stretched thin across locations that expanded faster than training could keep up. Growth without foundation creates fractures. My new company operated differently. No unnecessary expansion. No inflated promises. Every contract included performance guarantees backed by data models I designed years ago inside our original business. Models Ethan had never fully understood. The first time I saw his truck parked outside one of my client warehouses, I realized he was watching. Not openly. Strategically. He sent a regional sales manager to propose subcontracting overflow work. He framed it as synergy. A way to reduce tension in the market. It was not synergy. It was survival. I declined again. Quietly. Then something unexpected happened. The investor who backed Ethan requested a meeting with me. That was the moment the temperature changed. He reached out through a mutual industry contact. Casual lunch. Neutral location. No formal agenda. Investors do not request casual meetings unless something concerns them. When we sat down, he did not attack. He observed. Asked about my operational philosophy. Inquired how I maintained turnaround efficiency with a smaller team. Mentioned market volatility and sustainability models. He was measuring. I answered directly. No bitterness. No personal commentary about Ethan. Just metrics, retention data, technician development frameworks, long-term scalability projections. Halfway through the meeting, he leaned back. He said something that stayed with me. Control means nothing if it cannot generate stability. He never mentioned Ethan by name. He did not need to. 2 weeks later, rumors surfaced. The investor was reconsidering expansion timelines, tightening capital flow, demanding revised forecasts. Pressure increased. Ethan called me personally for the first time since the lockout. His tone was different. Less authority. More urgency. He suggested buying out my remaining shares completely. Said it would simplify matters for everyone. Simplify. He wanted to erase me. But I still owned equity. Minority, yes. But legally present. I declined the offer. Then I made my first aggressive move. I exercised a dormant clause in the partnership agreement requiring a formal financial transparency audit under shareholder rights. Completely legal. Completely disruptive. Within days, internal accountants began reviewing operational expenses, expansion allocations, and investor agreements. Ethan had removed me from the building. He forgot he could not remove me from the paperwork. The audit would not destroy him, but it would expose weaknesses. And exposure changes power dynamics faster than confrontation ever could. He locked me out of the doors. Now I was inside the numbers. And numbers do not lie. The audit request hit harder than I expected. Within 48 hours, the company's legal team responded with resistance disguised as compliance. They asked for extensions, clarifications, scope limitations. Every delay tactic wrapped in professional language. That told me everything. If the books were clean, transparency would be easy. Instead, tension started leaking from inside. A former accounting supervisor contacted me discreetly. She said expense reallocations had accelerated after the investor deal closed. Marketing budgets inflated. Executive bonuses adjusted. Vendor contracts renegotiated at higher rates under urgency clauses. Urgency can justify almost anything, especially when growth is used as a shield. The audit team began reviewing capital deployment against projected revenue increases. The numbers did not align cleanly. Expansion costs had exceeded forecast by a margin large enough to concern any serious investor. But the real issue was cash flow compression. Operational reserves were thinner than public statements suggested. Ethan had bet everything on rapid scaling. He assumed momentum would outrun inefficiency. Momentum always slows. 3 weeks into the audit, the investor called an emergency board meeting. I was entitled to attend as a shareholder, even with diluted voting power. Walking into that conference room felt different from standing outside the locked shop months earlier. No glass barrier now. No security panel denying access. Just a long table, tension thick in the air, and Ethan at the head trying to maintain control. He looked sharper, leaner, less confident. The investor requested revised forecasts under conservative models. Revenue projections were adjusted downward. Debt exposure was recalculated. Short-term liquidity risks were outlined plainly. No dramatic accusations. Just numbers. Then came the question that shifted everything. What contingency plan exists if fleet contract renewals decline by 15% next quarter? Silence filled the room. Ethan presented mitigation strategies. Cost reductions. Staffing flexibility. Marketing intensification. All reactive. None structural. That was when the investor turned toward me. He asked how I would stabilize under those conditions. The room tightened. I outlined phased consolidation. Focus on high-margin contracts. Reduction of unnecessary retail marketing spend. Reinforcement of technician retention programs. Slower but durable scaling. Sustainability over spectacle. I did not attack Ethan directly. I did not need to. Contrast was enough. By the end of the meeting, the board mandated operational oversight adjustments. Financial checkpoints tightened. Executive compensation temporarily frozen pending review. Control had not shifted, but authority had cracked. After the meeting, Ethan stopped me in the hallway. His composure was thinner now. He asked why I was doing this. I told him the truth. You removed me from the building. You never removed my responsibility to what we built. He thought locking me out ended the story. He did not realize he had invited me into a much larger arena. And the next move would not be about audits. It would be about ownership. Ownership was never just about percentages. It was about leverage. After the board meeting, internal morale inside the company shifted. When leadership confidence weakens, employees sense it immediately. Technician turnover increased. 2 mid-level managers resigned within the same month. Exit interviews cited instability and unclear direction. Instability spreads faster than growth. Meanwhile, my company continued operating lean and profitable. No dramatic announcements. No aggressive advertising. Just consistent performance reports quietly shared with clients and industry contacts. Then the opportunity appeared. One of Ethan's largest commercial fleet contracts announced a competitive rebid process. Officially, it was routine. Unofficially, performance inconsistencies had triggered review. This contract represented nearly 20% of projected annual revenue for his expansion model. Losing it would not destroy the company, but it would expose vulnerability to the investor. I prepared differently. Instead of undercutting on price, I built a proposal centered entirely on operational reliability, predictive maintenance analytics, Guaranteed turnaround windows backed by penalty clauses. Technician certification transparency. Direct reporting dashboards for fleet managers. Confidence without aggression. During the presentation, the client asked a single question that mattered most. Can you scale without sacrificing consistency? I answered with phased growth architecture and controlled onboarding systems. No rush expansion. No inflated promises. 3 weeks later, the contract transferred. Quietly. No press release. But inside the boardroom, impact was immediate. Revenue forecasts adjusted downward again. Liquidity pressure increased. The investor demanded restructuring conversations. This time the discussion was not about oversight. It was about equity rebalancing. The investor proposed injecting additional capital under revised terms that would further dilute existing shares. Ethan's controlling position would shrink significantly. Control slipping through his hands the same way he once took it from mine. He reached out again, urgency now visible. He proposed reconciliation. Suggested merging our operations under a unified leadership structure. He offered to restore my executive position with defined authority. The irony was sharp. Months ago, I stood outside locked doors. Now he was offering keys. But keys only matter if the building is stable. I requested full access to financial projections and debt exposure before considering anything. Transparency first. Alignment second. When the documents arrived, the situation was clearer than ever. Expansion debt was heavier than publicly acknowledged. Vendor credit lines strained. Investor patience thinning. He had built speed. I had built resilience. The balance of power was shifting quietly, structurally. And for the first time, I realized something unexpected. I no longer needed my old seat at the table. I could buy the table instead. And the opportunity to do exactly that was closer than Ethan imagined. The opportunity came disguised as pressure. The investor requested a private strategy session. Not a board meeting. Not a formal review. Just a closed-door discussion about future direction. That alone signaled instability. When we met, the numbers were laid out without decoration. Revenue contraction. Debt maturity timelines. Vendor strain. Declining renewal confidence from 2 additional fleet accounts still under review. The expansion gamble had reached its tipping point. Then the investor said something that changed everything. He was open to restructuring ownership entirely if stability could be guaranteed. Entirely. That word carried weight. He explained his position clearly. Capital had been deployed aggressively under Ethan's projections. Returns were not materializing at the required pace. The company needed operational discipline more than marketing velocity. He did not accuse. He calculated. Then he asked whether I would consider increasing my stake. Not as an executive. As majority control. The room felt smaller. Buying in would not be emotional revenge. It would be financial risk. The debt exposure was real. If recovery failed, I would inherit the collapse. I requested 48 hours. That night, I reviewed every report again. Vendor liabilities. Payroll commitments. Asset valuations. Contract durability. Worst-case scenarios mapped against conservative recovery timelines. The business was wounded. Not broken. The core infrastructure I built still existed beneath the instability. Systems could be restored. Waste could be trimmed. Growth could be recalibrated. But one variable remained unpredictable. Ethan. The next morning, before I gave the investor my answer, Ethan arrived at my office unannounced. No appointment. No corporate posture. Just him. He looked exhausted. Not defeated. But aware. He said he knew the investor had spoken to me. He admitted cash flow was tighter than expected. He insisted he could fix it if given time. Time was the one resource the company no longer had. Then he asked the question he had avoided for months. Was this about revenge? I looked at him carefully. If this were revenge, I would have attacked publicly. Filed lawsuits. Damaged reputation. Undermined contracts aggressively. I did none of that. I built quietly. He removed me believing control meant dominance. He never understood that control without competence collapses. I told him I was considering stepping in to stabilize the company. His jaw tightened. He understood what that meant. Majority stake meant leadership transition. Authority shift. Reporting lines reversed. For the first time, silence came from him. Not strategic silence. Realization. I gave the investor my answer that afternoon. Yes, but only under one condition. Full operational authority. And no interference. The paperwork would take weeks. But the shift had already begun. Ethan locked me out once. Now the door was opening again. Only this time, I would decide who stood outside. Due diligence moved fast. Lawyers drafted revised equity agreements. Valuations were recalculated under distressed conditions. Debt was renegotiated with structured repayment timelines tied to performance recovery milestones. Every signature tightened the shift. When the transaction closed, I became majority owner. Not loudly. Not publicly announced with celebration. Just ink on paper that redefined everything. The board convened within days to formalize leadership restructuring. Executive authority transferred. Oversight committees dissolved. Operational command centralized under my direction. Ethan retained minority shares. But control was gone. Watching him sit at the same table where he once dictated terms felt surreal. Months earlier, he stood between me and the entrance keypad. Now he waited for agenda approval. The transition meeting was direct. No emotional speeches. No references to the past. Just strategic correction. Immediate cost containment. Freeze on non-essential expansion. Vendor renegotiations prioritized. Executive compensation revised to performance-based structures, including his. His title shifted from Chief Executive Officer to Regional Operations Director under centralized reporting. A demotion on paper. A reversal in reality. Some expected me to remove him entirely. I did not. Not yet. The company needed continuity during recovery. Abrupt removal could destabilize morale further. And I wanted him to witness what disciplined leadership looked like. The first few weeks were tense. Managers adjusted cautiously. Technicians waited to see whether promises would match action. Investors monitored daily reporting. I implemented transparent dashboards accessible across departments. Performance metrics displayed in real time. Accountability was no longer selective. Under this structure, inefficiencies surfaced quickly. One underperforming branch required consolidation. 2 vendor contracts were terminated. Marketing spend reduced by nearly 30% without impacting lead quality. Cash flow stabilized gradually. Then came the moment I did not anticipate. A major fleet client requested a site visit with leadership. They expected Ethan. Instead, I walked in. He followed behind me. During the meeting, the client referenced past inconsistencies. I addressed each with corrective measures already in place. Ethan remained silent until directly asked for input. The shift was visible. Not humiliating, but undeniable. Afterward, in the parking lot, he finally spoke. He said he never imagined it would unfold this way. Neither did I. But decisions create trajectories. He chose dominance over partnership. I chose endurance over ego. The company was stabilizing. Revenue rebounded slowly. Investor confidence returned cautiously. Internal morale improved measurably. Yet beneath the recovery, one final tension remained. He was working under me. And sooner or later, that reality would either rebuild him or break him completely. The recovery phase tested more than financial structure. It tested pride. Ethan adapted on the surface. He followed reporting protocols, submitted weekly operational summaries, attended leadership briefings without resistance. From the outside, it looked professional. But pressure reveals character slowly. One afternoon, I reviewed a regional performance report from his division. Numbers were improving, but not because of aggressive expansion. They were improving because he finally applied the discipline systems he once dismissed. Cost tracking aligned. Technician scheduling optimized. Customer follow-up tightened. He was learning restraint. 3 months into stabilization, the board requested a long-term vision presentation. Investors wanted clarity beyond survival. They wanted direction. This time, I invited Ethan to co-present. Not as symbolism, as accountability. In the conference room where control had shifted months earlier, we stood side by side. I outlined the recalibrated 5-year strategy. Sustainable scaling. Data-driven forecasting. Measured acquisitions only after liquidity thresholds were secured. Then I handed the floor to him. He spoke differently now. Less volume. More precision. He acknowledged past overextension without dramatics. He detailed how regional operations would implement standardized performance frameworks to prevent instability. No defensiveness. Just ownership. When the meeting ended, investor approval was unanimous. The company was no longer fragile. It was structured. Later that evening, Ethan asked to speak privately. No confrontation. No bitterness. He admitted something simple. Locking me out had been fear disguised as control. He thought eliminating opposition would eliminate risk. Instead, it multiplied it. He said working under me forced him to confront what leadership actually required. Consistency. Patience. Humility. I listened. Not as a rival. As a partner who had been tested. Then I made the decision that closed the circle. I offered him a performance-based pathway to earn equity back gradually. Not gifted. Not symbolic. Earned through measurable growth targets tied to stability metrics. Redemption through discipline. His expression shifted from pride to resolve. Years ago, he locked me out of our family business. Today, he worked inside the structure I rebuilt. Not as my superior. Not as my enemy. But as someone who finally understood the cost of ego. The company survived. Control changed hands. But the real victory was not watching him report to me. It was proving that resilience outlasts exclusion. He shut the door once. I rebuilt the building. And this time, leadership was not about power. It was about responsibility. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more interesting revenge stories. See you in the next one.